rules and regulations. The payments professor sparks revelations. No need to feel the bed now.
Hey everybody, Payments Professor Kevin Olson here, and today on the Payments Podium, we're going to have a fun conversation about data breaches. What happens when they go wrong? I mean, really, when's a data breach ever go right, though? But to be able to have this great conversation, I got James Bowers. He's from Input Output. Met him a few weeks ago at a conference in Orlando. Started having a great conversation. He gave me some great swag that we might have to talk about at some point in time, too. But James, can I welcome you to the Payments Podium?
Absolutely. Very happy to be here, Kevin. Thank you.
Now, first question I got to ask is a question I actually ask everybody is not many people grow up wanting to get into this industry. It's just not a thing, and there's no track at any college I know of that say you're going to work in electronic payments. They're getting better, though. They really are getting better and getting more things out there. So how in the world did you end up where you are today? What got you into the payments realm?
Well, I actually really do the sexy side of the business, the security compliance, but mostly the policies and the procedures. I would say if the reason I got into it was just looking where most of the ladies were at, because that's what really gets them going. No, I've done IT forever, been financial side of things, been healthcare side, and I think probably like a lot of people probably fell into it, had a knack for the structure, for making it relatable and making it a little less boring, I guess. But really started diving into the business structure, and that was the policies, procedures, and then figuring out how best to support the companies as far as security, compliance, and I don't know, try not to make it so drab. It's difficult at times.
See, I knew we were a lot more alike than I originally even thought, because that's my story. It's basically, how do you make it fun? How do you make it exciting? And I just understood it, and I couldn't understand why I understood it, and I still do. But I do got to say, you're the first person who said the sexy side is security, compliance, policies, and procedures. Most people, run away from that.
It's the unspoken side. They can't handle all the attention. So, I don't want to say I'm a hero, but not everybody has to wear capes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, so we're going to talk about security breaches. And a lot of times you hear about, what do you do to stop a security breach? What do you do to be able to prevent it? And I know there's podcasts galore on that. But you enlightened me on something of more like, what do you do after it's happened? And where can it go wrong even after it's happened? Mm-hmm. So paint that picture for me.
Yeah, so like you said, there's tons of podcasts. We even have some of them that talk about all the things leading up to it. Here's how you prepare. Here's how you put everything in place. And a data breach, it's never fun. They're always horrible. It's never a good time. But where it can really get worse, where it can really go sideways, is when you're not doing all of that prep work. They're not setting up the policies and the procedures. They're not setting up their processes. And what that turns into is when you're in the midst of a data breach, one of the things is your insurance company is going to say, okay, let's look at everything that you did. What did you have in place? And what were you doing that could have stopped this? Well, a lot of companies never do the policies and procedures, or they do them and they get thrown on a desk and they just collect dust. They never look at them. And one of the things the insurance company will say is, well, you weren't doing anything. Had you actually gone by your policies, or had you put a plan in place, you might have been able to stop this, or at least contained it so it wasn't as big of a deal.
So wait, if I'm understanding correctly, that the insurance company is coming in after the data breach, and they're actually going to comb through the policies and procedures that are there?
They're going to comb through everything that you did, what you were executing, which that in itself isn't a bad thing. They should do. They need to see what happened, what do we need to cover, what was the extent of it. But there's also that piece that when you signed your insurance policy, you said, yeah, we've got policies. Yeah, we're doing this. Yeah, we're doing audits. We're doing all these things to stay secure. They're going to make sure that you were doing that you were doing all the things you said you were doing when they did the underwriting. And if you weren't, it creates a situation where they may actually back out and say, listen, you weren't you weren't doing your side of it. We're not going to cover this claim.
Wow. Okay. Because here's the thing with me. I don't think I've gone a day in, years, decades even now without saying policies and procedures. It's just, a thing that is part of my daily life. Even my days off, I end up saying it for some reason. And one of the things I've always said is you got to review your policies and procedures and get them approved by the board. And you got to make sure you got contingency plans in place. But I got to admit here on the internet, I have never said you need to do it in preparation for your insurance companies. I've never said or even thought about that. I got to admit. So is this something like maybe you have a specific review just for what the insurance company might look for?
It's kind of all of it together, because that's one of the, when we come in and we look at, all right, let's get the policies and procedures together. As fun as they are, it serves a business purpose. And what we want to do is make sure that if you're ever sitting on the other side of a regulator, an insurance company, a lawyer in a courtroom, I don't want you as my client to ever be found negligent. I don't want them to ever be able to have that claim. They may be able to say, you could have done better. We all could. That's even our logo, be better, do better every day. But if you don't have the things in place, that's where you could fall into that negligence. You're not doing your due care, not doing your due diligence. And that can hit you, one, with the insurance company, because you signed with them saying you were doing it. But then that opens you up to lawsuits, because if you weren't following your due diligence, your due care, well, your clients are expecting you to do those things. You probably post on your website that we're a secure company. So now that opens you up to a data breach that an attorney could come in and say, you didn't even have your policies in order. Had you done that, our class action clients wouldn't have had an issue. So this is on you.
I'm grateful for something else you said right in there too. I've told people for years, what would you tell the judge? What's it going to be
Yeah.
like if you get in court? So I love that you went there, and it's not a scare tactic. It's
No.
reality. It's a reality of this is what can happen if you haven't done things correctly. And I think that gets overlooked a lot of times.
Yeah. How are you going to explain that? And that's a perfect thing with the risk management, with all of it. Don't explain it to me. Explain it to a judge or a regulator.
Yeah, I mean, in the industry, we're experts on this. We get this. We know
Yep.
this. But when you get into the courts, a lot of times you're having to educate those people and help them to form the point of view. And if it's basic things that weren't done, it's not hard for them without a payments background and education to understand, no, you didn't do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, and it's real easy to start picking that apart. And unfortunately, that's not seen a lot, I think. And it's probably the same on the payment industry when people are setting things up, that you've got maybe sales reps, or you've got some people setting things up that they know enough. They know a little bit. But then when things hit the fan and you really start peeling back those layers and really start digging into it, that's where you start pulling it apart, saying, no, you didn't have this put together. And it opens the companies, it opens the clients, the employees, everybody just up to massive headaches. And that can even start going down the line to the service providers, to everybody. It can become a mess.
Can we drill into it a little bit more? So let's say you've had the data breach and you now got the insurance company, they're coming in, they're doing their inspection. Like, what more in detail are they actually looking at? What is it that they're looking for? Because I get it, and people may not realize this, but the insurance companies don't want to pay a claim if they don't have to.
Correct.
Because, I mean, if you've done what you're supposed to as a client, don't get me wrong, insurance companies are glad to pay. But if you haven't done what you're supposed to, no, they shouldn't have to. Even I agree with
Yeah.
them on that point of view. So what is it they're actually like looking for in more detail that listeners should be thinking about making sure that they've got in place?
All right. So definitely stop me. I'll kind of breeze through some of it to be respectful of the time and try and cover all of it, but definitely
So is this going to be a
open to
dissertation?
interruptions.
Are you
This
going
is,
to be the honorary professor?
well,
here?
I don't have my whiteboard, so I'll have to wing it. All right, so we've got a data breach. It's day one. We just found out. We try to figure out what happened. We figure out, okay, we need to call the insurance company. All right, now you're following your incident response plan that you have, your policy, but you call in the insurance company, and then they're going to typically bring in a whole team. They're going to bring in their own incident response team, the containment team. They'll typically bring in their own legal counsel. Eventually, they may bring in what's called an e-discovery team. But what they're going to do is first stop the bleeding. Then they want to contain everything as much as they can. And then they want to start figuring out what happened. Okay, exactly how did this breach occur? But also what was accessed. And this is a really big thing. What data was accessed? What personal PII, personally identifiable information, was accessed? What clients got impacted? And that typically takes a long time where they're digging into all of the files, they're digging into all of the structure to figure out who do we need to notify legally, because every state right now has their own privacy reporting requirements. It's an absolute mess. But who do we need to notify? How extensive is this breach? Well, as they're going through all of it and working to see exactly what happened, why it happened, let's say it was coming in from an old user account. Well, how were you monitoring the accounts? Why did it take you so long to notice this? When did you last do an audit to see if this was a legitimate account? And these things, just as the natural questions coming out of the very legitimate investigation,
But the
start
first step, though, is just really what happened.
what happened.
And the first step is more than just really what happened, who's been affected by it. That's the first thing to
Correct.
identify it, right? And then I feel like you're going to the next step now. Okay, now that we figured out who's been affected, now that we know what has happened, why did it happen? What allowed it to happen?
Exactly. Yep. In the full extent of it, those are typically happening at the same time. So that's where it starts coming out about all of those little, like a payments audit. When you have a regulator coming in looking at, okay, well, how'd you do all of your payments? And they start looking at different things, and you've got that bellyache because you know they're going to turn over that one report that you didn't file correctly. It's the same thing going through this incident investigation. And as they're finding all of these things, that's where, if we don't have everything together, they start making a case either against some of the third parties, some of the people that were involved, and also, like you said, they're looking to make sure that you were holding up your end of the bargain. Otherwise, they're not going to want to pay it. And then that opens you up. If you get denied that claim, well, that's typically because a lack of due diligence. Well, that opens you up for class action lawsuits. And then if you're under any regulations, which a lot of the people listening to us are under FTC safeguards rule, GLBA, those that are publicly traded are under SOX compliance. There's all types of different compliance standards and requirements. These all have those same incident response requirements and the protection requirements.
Okay, before we get in trouble with the regulators, I want to go back for a second to the audit, because something that hit me right there is it's just like a payments audit. I think you said something to that effect.
Yep.
And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, do the companies come in and actually look at the audits that have been done to see if, hey, what was discovered in previous audits? Did it get corrected? Do they look at any of the risk assessments? I mean, are they doing the same audit from a different point of view? Because I know everybody listening, I'm sure, is sitting there saying, Professor, we have heard your podcast before about doing the audit, been in the classes about doing the audit. We're doing the audit. What is it maybe that we missed or did wrong?
Yeah, I've seen that happen, to where they'll start looking at things and saying, when was your last risk assessment? When did you last do a vulnerability assessment? All right, let's look at those results. Okay, from the things that were found, what did you do to improve those? Have you had a third party come in, or has it just always been internal audits?
I'm a big one on that one. I am a big one on that one. I tell people all the time, I get for the larger institutions that have a separate compliance department, I get there's a level of separation there that is to me more acceptable. But the smaller institution, I am a big proponent. You need outside eyes to come see things you'll
Mhm.
just never see yourself.
100%. And those are all of the things that they can start looking at to help show that, listen, Kevin, had you done a third party audit, they would have caught this. Had you done a real risk assessment, or actually done it quarterly and followed your procedures to address those risks, you would have probably prevented this. Had you had proper monitoring in place, you probably still got the breach, but it wouldn't be such a major issue. And that's where all of these things that just kind of get set to the side, we'll get to that next quarter. That's not part of kind of our fiscal initiative. That's where they can really catch up, and it explodes.
Well, something else too is the third party aspect. Because I know a lot of times, and especially like here lately, I'm doing a lot with FedNow and RTP. It's very new, especially in doing audits. I teach all kinds of classes on it. And I'll even sit there and say, what's happening with your third parties? Because I know they're using a third party to get it done. What do your service level agreements look like? But I am not touching data breaches. I am not. I mean, I'm maybe doing fraud monitoring to be able to see in and out transactions, but none of this other stuff. So for all payment channels, though, what would you say you should be doing, you should be looking for, have in place to be preventive measures with third parties? Because most people are dealing with a third party at some point in time.
I think the best way to look at it is, one, you can't ever transfer your fiduciary responsibility. If I give my keys to you for you to borrow my car, and then you give the keys to somebody else and they crash it, you can't tell me that, well, they crashed it, go talk to them. I don't care. I gave you my keys. This is between me and you. I don't care who else was driving the car. And it's the same thing with any data that you ingest. It's like toxic waste. Once you have it, it's there. You're not getting rid of it. And with your third parties, you need to be very diligent on, what are you doing with our data? How are you protecting the data? Also, how are you deleting the data once you no longer need it? Because it's previously just been a thing that everybody just saves everything and will maybe use that for marketing, and it just sits there forever. But now it needs to be, the biggest thing you can do when you're doing your third party assessments is really dive into those data details. What are you doing with it? How do you delete it? How can we audit that? And how can we further restrict it? And a cherry on top, if you can give your third parties just enough information without being able to identify someone, even better. Because then if there's a breach, it's not so bad.
Wow, that's a lot. All right. So we got the financial institution, we got third parties. Let's get back to that regulator aspect, because
Okay.
that's the part that is scaring people right there. And you mentioned like some serious regulations, GLBA, all of the other ones that are out there. I know too, if we even have clients that are in healthcare, it just went to another level that gets even more scary. So what happens on the regulatory side, especially like notifying them, letting them get involved? What are they going to say?
So a really neat thing with the regulators is they've found out how much money they can make from hitting companies that aren't following all of the rules. So let's say your insurance company says, you know what, we're not going to cover you, and here's all the reasons why. Well, that opens you up to a regulator coming in and saying, Kevin, they were saying you weren't doing your risk assessments, that you weren't doing your internal audits, that you weren't doing adequate vulnerability assessments. Those are all requirements under our regulation here, under the FTC safeguards. Or perhaps now I'm not going to go there yet. That's just the regulators. So they can use that as a case that you're not doing what you're supposed to do from a regulatory standpoint. And we can hit you with fines. We can hit you with different sanctions. In some cases, there have been companies that even have to report in every year once they do their audit to show that now they actually are following through with what they are supposed to. So the fines and in the sanctions can be just massive. And with FTC safeguards and some others, that can even go against the actual leadership team personally, not just the company. So there's a lot riding on that.
So it is like all other aspects. The board isn't necessarily safe. They
No,
should be informed, be aware. Senior management, same thing, should be informed, be aware. C-level, without a doubt, should be informed, be aware, because there are liabilities.
correct. And it comes down to they're ultimately responsible. And the question with a lot of regulators is, well, how are you making sure that it was being executed correctly? And the thing of, well, we just delegated that over there, that that doesn't work. How are you verifying it? The trust but verify. So that's why the third party audits, especially on the leadership team, I think are so very important. Just to make sure, even just from a CYA perspective, that they're covering all their bases.
Okay, James, I got to ask now. I got to do it. What do I do? Because I know people are sitting there screaming and going, all right, you told me a bunch of scary stuff. And I mean, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I want to make sure we answer the what do I do? I don't want to be in this situation. Regulators are upset. I might be going to jail. I didn't do a proper audit. I got to notify all these people of what went wrong. I mean, this is scary stuff.
Yeah, the sky's falling, everything. I think the biggest thing is one, making sure you have the policies and procedures together. We talk about that a lot. Match those up to the regulations that you have to follow. And they can seem very, very arduous or scary when you first look at them.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, they're really just a checklist. Are you doing this? Can you match that up to somewhere in your policy? If so, you're probably good. And then have a third party, somebody else, check that. Try to have them poke
Okay,
holes
that
in it.
right there, because that's the golden question I get a lot. I'm telling people, I'm sure you're doing the same thing. You got to have the policies, you got to have the procedures. But the question I get a lot back from people is, how do I know if they're any good? How do I know if I've done them right? How do I build them properly?
It's those audits. And that's where it's having somebody come in. Shameless plug, that's what we really help with in helping understand the left and the right. Hey, here's the risk if you tighten this up, or the impact to the business. Here's the risk if you don't. Which way do you want to go? But really having the audits and the third parties coming in to take a look at everything, I think those are the biggest things. That's going to identify all the biggest issues. And not being scared if there's issues that you're not covering correctly. If you have gaps, that's perfectly okay. Document them, create a plan to fix them, and then actually work at executing that. Because as scary as it sounds, the insurance companies, the regulators, maybe not lawyers, but most of them are for the most part on your side and understand that nobody's perfect. And if you're doing really the best you can or the most appropriate that you can, you're typically going to be okay. A data breach is still going to hurt. It's still going to suck, but it's not going to be an absolute disaster.
So I guess what it comes down to today is we're getting here towards the end. What would be, like the number one piece of advice that you would say, all of you out there listening, you want to make sure that this doesn't happen to you? Besides policies and procedures, I get that
Mhm.
part, but you want to make sure this doesn't happen to you. This is what I would tell you to go do. This is my advice to you.
If it was only one thing to say, I would definitely say make sure you have a third party audit from a trusted source. Have them come and check through everything. And
Would it, go ahead, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I said, would it also be a risk assessment too? Risk assessment and audit. And here's the reason I say this is I have said for years, there's a difference between a risk assessment and an audit. An audit is looking behind you at what you've been doing and what you've
Mhm.
done. And then the risk assessment is taking into consideration what could go wrong, what are you currently doing, and are there any gaps in that?
Well, you said what was the one thing, so I stuck with the audit. But the risk assessment's the most important for building it all. But I think the audit's going to help see, is our risk assessment appropriate? To where that auditor can also look at and say, listen, there's some gaps in your risk assessment process. The way that you're looking at things is leaving a lot of gaps. So the risk assessment is is probably the most important thing. Building the program, putting it all together, making sure you're doing it right, I would say, is the audit side of things. Like a trick question there.
Yeah, good job. You got it covered there. Now, okay, one more question I got for you that I love to ask people is, as somebody who's been very successful in your career, somebody who's got actually, for those of you watching and listening, dresses better than me, just got to say, what advice would you tell people in the industry that are, especially people getting in that are new, that want to have a successful career? Like, here's the things I would tell you to do if you want to be successful in this industry, if you want to have a long career, you want to advance through the ranks. This is my advice to you on what it would take to be able to get there.
I don't dress better. I can't pull off a bow tie. I've tried. I don't even know how to tie it. But I think the biggest thing is keeping it tied to the business. I mean, as important as security and compliance is, as important as payment processing is, if the business isn't making money, none of it matters. So first and foremost, always keeping that, is this helping to support the business? Is this helping to support the bottom line? And looking at it from that perspective. It's, I think, just a perspective shift of keeping that in line. And then that helps you educate everybody better. It helps you relate definitely to the board better because they see that you're on the same side, not just trying to pitch a lot of products and different solutions and things that are going to make the day more difficult, but actually protect their business. I think that's the biggest thing. What's going to drive the business? How are we going to help you reach your 3, 5, and 10-year goals?
Okay. One last question, very most important one too, is I believe you got a podcast. Anybody who's watching you too, where would they find that? How would they get a hold of you?
So right on our website at inputoutput.com, we have the link to our podcast. We're also on YouTube. It is Cash in the Cyber Sheets. So we talk a lot about how to marry the security and compliance aspect to the business side of things and really help, again, drive the business and not so much focus just on the security and compliance side of it.
All right, I love that. People, inputoutput.com. You want to go there if you want to be able to learn more. Thank you, James, for being on today, giving me some education, and I'm sure all the listeners out there getting something from this too. For all of you out there, if there is a topic, there is a speaker that you think needs to be on the payments podium, all you got to do, send me an email, send me a message. I will do all I can to make sure that they get covered on the payments podium. That topic gets on the payments podium. Always here to serve you, making payments a little bit more fun and exciting. But for now, this is the part where I get to say, class dismissed.
There's a world out there, it's a digital maze where dollars move in mysterious ways. Complex systems, rules, and regulations. The payments professor sparks revelations.